I'm Amanda, 32 years old and 5 years into my marriage with Michael. My mother-in-law Eleanor has always thought I wasn't good enough for her precious son. But that night at Bellini's when she banned me from the family dinner, I just burst out laughing. The look on her face when I asked the owner for a special table was priceless. Eleanor had no idea the restaurant owner and I went back 20 years. Talk about karma serving the perfect dish. Before I dive into this wild story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever dealt with an impossible in-law. Trust me, you'll want to stay until the end to see how Eleanor's face completely dropped when she realized exactly who owned that five-star restaurant. I grew up in Lakeville, Michigan, a small town where everyone knew everyone. My parents worked honest jobs, dad as a high school teacher and mom as a nurse at the local clinic. We weren't poor, but we certainly weren't wealthy. I shared a bedroom with my sister until I left for college, wearing hand-me-downs and working summer jobs to save for my future. Despite our modest means, my parents instilled in me the value of education and hard work. That determination took me to Michigan State on a partial scholarship, where I doubled up on classes while working part-time at the campus bookstore. After graduation, I landed an entry-level position at a marketing firm in Chicago. 7 years and countless late nights later, I'd worked my way up to become a senior marketing executive at one of the city's top agencies. I met Michael at an industry conference in New York. He was representing his family's investment firm, looking to rebrand their image for a younger clientele. Our eyes met across a crowded networking event, and something just clicked. We talked for hours that night, missing the evening's keynote speaker entirely. What started as a professional consultation over coffee the next morning turned into lunch, then dinner, and soon weekend trips between Chicago and Boston, where he lived. After 6 months of long distance, Michael surprised me with a job offer from a prestigious Chicago firm for himself. He'd decided to move to be with me. 3 months later, he proposed. It all felt like a fairy tale, until I met his family. The Harrisons weren't just wealthy, they were old money with a capital old. Their family name appeared on buildings across Boston. Michael's father, William, was polite but distant. His sister, Rebecca, friendly enough. But his mother, Eleanor, she was something else entirely. Our first meeting was at their summer home in Cape Cod. I'd brought a bottle of wine I thought was nice, one that cost me nearly a day's pay. Eleanor examined the label and handed it to their housekeeper with a tight smile. How thoughtful. We'll save this for cooking. That was just the beginning. Throughout that weekend, Eleanor peppered our conversations with little jabs about my quaint hometown, questions about my people, by which she meant my family's background, and comments about my practical career choice. Marketing is so commercial, she said over dinner. Though I suppose someone needs to do it. Michael seemed oblivious to these subtle digs. When I mentioned them later, he laughed it off. That's just Mom's way, he said. She's traditional. Give her time. And I tried. Lord knows I tried. I studied up on wine selections and art to have something to talk about with Eleanor. I learned proper table etiquette for formal dinners. I even took tennis lessons after discovering it was the family's Sunday tradition. But no matter what I did, Eleanor's approval remained just out of reach. Our first Thanksgiving with his family hammered this home. I'd offered to bring a side dish, my grandmother's sweet potato casserole that everyone back home raved about. Eleanor accepted with a dismissive wave. If you insist, dear. Though we do have our traditional menu planned by the caterer. When I arrived and placed my dish on the sideboard, Eleanor frowned. Oh, is that the interesting dish you mentioned? We'll make sure everyone gets a taste. Later, I overheard her telling her sister, Michael's little friend brought something from her family tradition. So, ethnic. My casserole remained largely untouched, pushed aside for Eleanor's caterer's version. Michael took a small helping but was too busy catching up with cousins to notice my humiliation. Despite these slights, I continued seeking common ground with Eleanor. I discovered she chaired a literacy foundation and volunteered to help with their annual fundraiser. For weeks, I dedicated evenings and weekends to assisting with planning, hoping to bond over the shared cause. The night of the event, I overheard Eleanor telling her friends, "Amanda's been so helpful with the grunt work. It's good for Michael to see she can contribute something to society beyond her little advertising campaigns." Each encounter left me feeling smaller, yet I persisted in my efforts to win her over. Michael remained caught in the middle, loving us both, but reluctant to see the growing tension. When I pointed out his mother's behavior, he would sigh. "She's just protective, Amanda. It took her years to warm up to my college girlfriend, too." What he failed to mention was that he and that girlfriend had eventually broken up. Sometimes I wondered if that's what Eleanor was counting on. Our engagement should have been one of the happiest times of my life. Instead, it became a battleground with Eleanor at the helm of an opposition army. The first salvo came when Michael and I announced we wanted a smaller wedding, perhaps on the beach in Michigan where I'd spent childhood summers. "A beach wedding?" Eleanor's voice dripped with disdain over brunch at their Boston home. "Darling, Harrisons have married at St. Thomas Episcopal for 5 generations. We've already spoken with Reverend Palmer about dates next June." Before I could respond, she pulled out a leather portfolio filled with venue options for the reception, all in Boston, all grandiose, all completely contrary to what Michael and I had discussed. "Mom," Michael started, "we were thinking of something more intimate." "Intimate?" Eleanor cut him off with a light laugh. "With our connections? The governor will expect an invitation, not to mention your father's colleagues and our friends from the club. We can't possibly keep it under 300 guests." 300 guests? I barely knew 30 people I'd want to invite. Over the next months, Eleanor steamrolled through every wedding decision. My cream and sage color scheme became royal blue and silver. Harrison colors, tradition. My selection of wildflowers was dismissed for structured arrangements of imported roses. Even my dress became a point of contention. "That silhouette isn't flattering for your build," she commented during a fitting, eyeing my curves with disapproval. "Perhaps something more slimming?" The day before our wedding, Eleanor hosted the rehearsal dinner. As gifts were presented, she stood to make a toast. "Tomorrow our Michael joins his life with Amanda's," she began, glass raised high. While their backgrounds couldn't be more different, a knowing titter rippled through her friends. "We welcome Amanda into our family circle with open arms and open hearts. We only hope she can adapt to our ways and make Michael as happy as he deserves." The backhanded welcome stung, but nothing compared to the wedding day itself. I'd finally won one battle. My choice of wedding dress, a vintage-inspired lace gown that made me feel beautiful. As I prepared to walk down the aisle, Eleanor appeared in the bridal suite wearing a cream-colored dress so pale it was nearly white. "Eleanor," my maid of honor gasped, "your dress is almost white." "This is champagne," Eleanor corrected with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. A mother of the groom should stand out, don't you think? The wedding photos tell the story. Eleanor positioned herself center in every shot, sometimes physically moving me aside to stand next to Michael. In one painful video clip, she can be seen adjusting my train in a way that actually pulled my dress askew. After the honeymoon, things escalated further. Eleanor instituted mandatory Sunday dinners at her home, regardless of our schedules. My work commitments were deemed selfish if they interfered. "Family comes first, Amanda," she would scold. Michael always understood that before. These dinners became weekly exercises in endurance. Eleanor would question my cooking. "Michael looks thin. Are you feeding him properly?" My housekeeping. "I noticed your living room was quite lived in when I stopped by." And even our family planning. "At your age, Amanda, you shouldn't wait too long for children," she announced over dessert one evening, though we'd never discussed our family plans with her. "Though I suppose with your career ambitions, children might not be a priority. First Thanksgiving in our new home should have been a milestone. I spent days preparing, determined to create a beautiful holiday. Hours before guests were to arrive, Eleanor showed up unannounced with bags of groceries. "I brought a few essentials," she explained, unpacking a turkey. "The butcher said the one you ordered was too small. And I've brought my china. The pattern has been used for Harrison Thanksgivings since I married into the family." She proceeded to rearrange my table settings, replace my carefully crafted centerpiece with her own, and take over my kitchen. By the time guests arrived, it was essentially Eleanor's Thanksgiving in my home. Michael finally began noticing these patterns after his college friend remarked on Eleanor's behavior. "Your mom is intense, man," his friend said after Eleanor corrected my pronunciation of a wine region. "Does she always talk to Amanda like that?" That night, Michael and I had our first real conversation about his mother. "I think she's just trying to help," he said, though doubt clouded his voice. "She has high standards." "There's a difference between high standards and disrespect," I replied. "I've been trying for years, Michael. Nothing I do is ever good enough." He promised to pay more attention, to step in when needed. But years of conditioning made it difficult for him to recognize, let alone confront, his mother's behavior. Eleanor's tactics evolved to include social media warfare. She would post unflattering photos of me with captions like, "Michael and Amanda visited today. Someone enjoyed my chocolate cake a little too much. Extra slice, Josh Sweetooth." Or she would tag me in old family photos where I wasn't present with comments, like Christmas 2010, such a perfect family gathering. Some traditions change, but memories remain. Family traditions. The good old days. Slowly, I began finding my voice. When Eleanor criticized my career after a major promotion, suggesting it was luck rather than skill, I finally pushed back. "Actually, Eleanor, I worked incredibly hard for this promotion. My team exceeded targets by 40% under my leadership." The table fell silent. No one had directly challenged Eleanor before. Her eyes narrowed slightly, but Michael quickly jumped in to change the subject. Later, he seemed torn between pride in my accomplishment and discomfort at the confrontation. "She means well," he said weakly, the phrase becoming his mantra. But the cracks in his defense were beginning to show. The true breaking point came 3 years into our marriage. I'd been selected to lead a major international campaign for our biggest client, an achievement that would require travel to London for 2 weeks. The timing coincided with the Harrison family's annual summer gathering at their Cape Cod property. "You're missing the family retreat for work?" Eleanor's voice over the phone dripped with disapproval. "Michael has never missed one, not once in 30 years. "This is a huge opportunity for my career," I explained. "The client specifically requested me to lead the presentation." "I suppose some people prioritize differently," she replied. "Family has always come first for Harrisons." I tried to be diplomatic. "I understand the importance of tradition, Eleanor. But this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for my career. Michael understands." "Does he?" Her tone sharpened. "Or is he just afraid to disappoint you? You know, before you came along, Michael was considering joining his father's firm. He had a real future mapped out." The implication was clear. I had derailed Michael's proper path. The conversation deteriorated from there, ending with Eleanor declaring, "Well, I'll make sure Michael enjoys himself despite your absence. Caroline, Reynolds' daughter, will be there. They were quite close in college, you know." When I relayed the conversation to Michael that evening, expecting support, he surprised me. "Maybe you could postpone the London trip," he suggested. "The retreat is important to my family." I stared at him in disbelief. "This campaign could define my career, Michael. Your mother is trying to manipulate both of us." "She just values family time," he defended, though his voice lacked conviction. "She mentioned Caroline Reynolds' daughter would be there," I said quietly. Apparently you two were quite close. Michael's expression shifted. That's completely inappropriate. Lisa Reynolds is married with 3 kids now. Your mother is actively trying to make me feel threatened and replaceable, I said. And you're taking her side. The argument escalated, voices raised, years of accumulated tension bursting forth. Michael finally admitted his mother could be difficult, but insisted I was oversensitive to her comments. He spent the night in our guest room. The next morning, Michael left early for work without resolving our fight. By afternoon, my phone was buzzing with text messages from his sister, Rebecca. What did you say to Mom? She's called everyone in. The family about how you're destroying Michael's connection to his roots and isolating him. I felt sick. Somehow, our private disagreement had become family gossip, with me cast as the villain. When Michael returned home, he was seething. My mother is upset, he said tightly. She says you called her manipulative and controlling. I said those things to you, not her, I replied, which means you repeated our private conversation. She's my mother. And I'm your wife, I shouted back. When do I come first, Michael? When do we become our own family unit instead of an extension of hers? The silence that followed was deafening. Michael looked genuinely torn, possibly for the first time seeing the impossible position he'd put me in for years. I need to think, he said finally, grabbing his keys. He returned hours later, subdued and thoughtful. I called Lisa Reynolds, he admitted. Asked her if Mom had been in touch recently. My stomach dropped. She said Mom called last week to catch up and mentioned several times that you and I were having problems, suggested I might need family support at the retreat. Michael sat heavily beside me. You've been right all along, I just couldn't see it. This moment of clarity should have been a turning point, but real change comes slowly. Michael called his mother the next day, attempting to establish boundaries. The conversation ended with Eleanor in tears, claiming medical issues brought on by stress, and Michael drowning in guilt. The London trip became a flashpoint. I went, as planned, achieving tremendous success with the campaign. Michael ultimately skipped the family retreat to make a weekend visit to me in London instead. The fallout was nuclear. Eleanor stopped calling Michael directly, instead relaying messages. Through his father or sister about her declining health and heartbreak, family members began taking sides. Some, like Michael's cousin Thomas, reached out to me privately. Eleanor's been pulling these strings for decades, he confided. It's about time someone called her bluff. Others rallied around Eleanor, sending thinly veiled messages about family loyalty and outsiders who don't understand our ways. For the first time, I stopped trying to please Eleanor. I declined invitations to her charity events. I didn't call on her birthday, sending only a card. When she made passive-aggressive comments, I would simply change the subject or, when necessary, leave the room. Michael wavered between supporting me and attempting to placate his mother. During one particularly difficult Sunday dinner, when Eleanor remarked that career women often make selfish wives, Michael finally spoke up. That's enough, Mom. I won't sit here while you insult my wife. Eleanor's shock was palpable. Her lower lip trembled as she turned to her husband. William, did you hear how he spoke to me? William, typically silent during these exchanges, simply continued eating. The power dynamic had shifted, if only slightly. As autumn approached, Eleanor's exclusionary tactics escalated. I discovered I'd been removed from the family group chat. Holiday planning emails circulated without my address included. The final trigger came when Michael's sister Rebecca called, sounding uncomfortable. Mom's planning Dad's 70th birthday dinner at Bellini's next Friday, she said. I noticed you weren't on the email thread. Bellini's was Boston's most exclusive new restaurant, with a 6-month waiting list for reservations. The chef owner had received Michelin stars for her previous restaurant in New York. She specifically scheduled it for when you're supposed to be at that conference in Detroit, Rebecca added. I thought you should know. The deliberate exclusion was the last straw. The conference was actually ending a day earlier than originally planned, something Eleanor couldn't have known. For the first time, I felt not hurt, but anger. Pure, clarifying anger. The birthday dinner for William was clearly designed to exclude me from the beginning. Eleanor had chosen Bellini's not just for its exclusivity, but for its intimate setting. The restaurant seated only 40 guests at a time, allowing her to claim space limitations when questioned. She'd carefully selected Friday evening, when I was scheduled to speak at a marketing conference in Detroit. Most cunningly, she'd told family members different stories about my absence. Amanda had a work conflict, poor dear. She sends her regrets, she told some. Amanda felt it best to give William a dinner with just close family, she told others. I discovered the plan quite by accident. While using Michael's laptop to print some documents, an email notification appeared from his cousin Thomas. Looking forward to Uncle William's birthday dinner at Bellini's on Friday. Will Amanda be back from her conference by then? When I asked Michael about it, he looked genuinely confused. Dad's birthday dinner? Mom said she was planning something small, next month. A quick call to Rebecca confirmed my suspicions. Not only was Eleanor planning a major celebration, but she'd invited extended family and William's business associates, nearly 30 people in total. I assumed you knew, Rebecca said, sounding increasingly uncomfortable. Mom said you couldn't make it because of your conference. I sat in stunned silence after hanging up. 5 years of trying to fit in, of extending olive branches only to have them snapped in half, crashed down around me. Michael was livid when I showed him the email thread Rebecca forwarded to me. This is completely unacceptable, he fumed, pacing our living room. I'm calling her right now. Wait, I said, a memory suddenly surfacing. Bellini's? The chef owner is Sarah Bellini? I think so, Michael replied, distracted. Why? I pulled out my phone and searched for the restaurant's website. There she was, Sarah Bellini, formerly Sarah Mitchell, my childhood best friend from Lakeville, Michigan. Sarah and I had been inseparable from kindergarten through high school. We'd lost touch somewhat during college as our paths diverged. Me to marketing, her to culinary school. But we'd reconnected through social media a few years back, exchanging occasional messages. I knew she'd been making a name for herself in New York before opening a new restaurant in Boston, but I hadn't connected the dots that Bellini's was hers. Michael, I said slowly, I know the owner. Sarah and I grew up together. We were best friends for years. Michael stopped pacing. Are you serious? Completely serious. We were joined at the hip until college. She was there for me when my dad had his heart attack in high school. I was there for her when her parents divorced. We shared everything. I scrolled through my phone to find old photos of us. At 16, arms thrown around each other at the lake. At 18, teary-eyed at graduation in our caps and gowns. A plan began forming in my mind. The conference ends Thursday afternoon. I could fly back Thursday night instead of Friday morning. Michael caught on immediately, a slow smile spreading across his face. You're thinking of crashing the dinner? Not crashing, I corrected. Just arriving unexpectedly. We debated the wisdom of this approach. Michael worried it would cause a scene. I argued that Eleanor had engineered this situation precisely to exclude me while maintaining plausible deniability. If I confront her directly, she'll just deny any ill intent, I explained. This way, the truth will be obvious to everyone. I reached out to Sarah through Instagram, not mentioning the situation, but asking if she'd be at the restaurant Friday evening, as I might be in the area. Her enthusiastic response came quickly. Amanda! Yes, I'm always there. Please come by. I'd love to see you. It's been forever. The pieces were falling into place. I arranged an earlier flight from Detroit and booked a salon appointment for Friday afternoon. If I was going to face Eleanor on her turf, I wanted to look my absolute best. Michael remained anxious about the potential fallout, but ultimately supported my decision. "She's gone too far this time," he admitted. "Maybe seeing you walk in will finally make her realize she can't keep playing these games." As Friday approached, I experienced a range of emotions: nervousness, righteous anger, and even a touch of satisfaction at the thought of Eleanor's surprise. The conference provided a welcome distraction, but by Thursday evening, as I boarded my flight back to Boston, butterflies swarmed in my stomach. What if this made things worse? What if it created a permanent rift? But then again, wasn't there already a rift? One that Eleanor had been widening for years? I checked into my hotel, tried to sleep, and spent Friday morning rehearsing potential scenarios in my head. By afternoon, as I sat in the salon chair getting my hair styled into loose waves, a strange calm had settled over me. For the first time in years, I wasn't anxious about Eleanor's approval. I was done seeking validation from someone determined not to give it. I chose a deep burgundy dress that hugged my curves, the very curves Eleanor had often subtly criticized. I applied my makeup with care, opting for a classic look with a bold red lip. The woman in the mirror looked confident, powerful, ready. Michael texted that the family had gathered at his parents' home before heading to the restaurant. He would meet me there, claiming he needed to handle a work call first. Our plan was in motion. As I stood outside Bellini's that evening, watching the Harrison family arrive in their luxury vehicles, I took a deep breath. This wasn't about revenge. It was about refusing to be erased. Bellini's occupied a restored brownstone in Boston's South End, its elegant facade illuminated by subtle lighting. Through the large front windows, I could see the warm glow of the dining room, tables draped in crisp white linens, crystal glasses catching the light from overhead chandeliers. The restaurant's minimalist sign, simply Bellini's in gold script, belied the culinary powerhouse it had become in Boston's competitive dining scene. I watched from across the street as the Harrison party arrived in waves. William and Eleanor. First, she directing the valet with precise instructions about their Mercedes. Then Michael's sister Rebecca and her husband. Cousins, aunts, uncles, business associates, all dressed impeccably, air-kissing and exchanging pleasantries on the sidewalk. Michael arrived last, texting me that everyone was seated before he entered. My phone buzzed again moments later. "They're all here. Mom is holding court at the head table. Ready when you are." I crossed the street, my heels clicking against the cobblestones. The butterflies in my stomach had transformed into a steady resolve. The maître d' looked up as I entered, his practiced smile in place. "Good evening, madam. Do you have a reservation?" "I'm here for the Harrison party," I said calmly. His expression shifted slightly as he consulted his tablet. "I'm sorry, but the Harrison reservation appears to be complete. All guests have arrived." "I'm Amanda Harrison," I replied. "Michael, Harrison's wife." Confusion flickered across his face. "One moment, please." As he stepped away to consult with someone, I glanced into the main dining room. I could see the Harrison party occupying several tables in a semi-private alcove. Eleanor sat beside William, gesturing animatedly as she spoke. Michael sat further, down, his posture tense as he glanced repeatedly toward the entrance. The maitre d' returned, looking uncomfortable. "Mrs. Harrison, it seems there's been some confusion with the reservation. Mrs. Eleanor Harrison indicated the final guest count yesterday, and we're at capacity for their section." "Is Sarah here tonight?" I asked. "Chef Bellini? Yes, she's in the kitchen, but she's extremely busy with dinner service. Could you please let her know Amanda Mitchell is here? She'll want to know." His eyebrows rose slightly at my confidence, but he nodded and disappeared again. Meanwhile, Eleanor had spotted me. I watched as her animated expression froze, her champagne glass halting midway to her lips. She leaned toward William, whispering urgently, Several family members turned to look in my direction. Michael stood, making his way toward me with a mixture of anxiety and determination on his face. Before he reached me, another figure emerged from the back of the restaurant. Sarah, still wearing her chef's coat, her face breaking into an enormous smile. "Amanda!" she cried, rushing forward to embrace me. "Oh my God, it's really you!" We hugged tightly, years of friendship transcending our time apart. When we separated, both a little teary, Sarah held me at arm's length. "Let me look at you, still gorgeous as ever. Why didn't you tell me you were coming tonight? I would have prepared something special." Michael had reached us by this point, and I made quick introductions. "Sarah, this is my husband, Michael. Michael, this is Sarah, my oldest friend in the world." Sarah shook Michael's hand warmly. "So you're the one who stole my best friend away to Boston. I should have known Amanda would marry someone handsome." As they exchanged pleasantries, I noticed Eleanor approaching, her smile tight and her eyes calculating. She reached our group just as Sarah was saying, "You should have told me you were coming to celebrate your father-in-law's birthday. I would have set aside my best table." Eleanor's voice cut in smoothly. "Amanda, what a surprise! We thought you were at your conference in Detroit." "It ended early," I replied with equal smoothness. "I wouldn't miss William's birthday celebration." Sarah looked between us, sensing the tension. "Wait, you're with the Harrison party? Why didn't you say so? We have them in our best section." "There seems to be some confusion," Eleanor interjected. "We submitted our final guest count yesterday. We're at capacity for the space." Sarah waved this away. "Nonsense. I always keep the chef's table available. It's the best seat in the house, right next to the kitchen. I insist you both join us there." Eleanor's expression tightened further. "The seating arrangements have already been made. It would disrupt everyone." "I'm sure we can make it work," Sarah said, her friendly tone taking on a slight edge. "After all, we can't have the birthday boy's daughter-in-law sitting separately, can we?" Michael stepped in. "Mom, Amanda flew back early specifically for Dad's birthday. I'm sure we can adjust the seating." Eleanor's composure slipped for just a moment, revealing the anger beneath. "Michael, I explained to you that the reservation was limited. If Amanda had RSVP'd properly instead of changing her plans last minute, I wasn't aware I needed to RSVP to my father-in-law's birthday dinner," I replied calmly, "especially since I never received an invitation." The implication hung in the air between us. Several nearby family members shifted uncomfortably, suddenly, very interested in the restaurant's decor. Sarah, ever perceptive, smoothly took control of the situation. "Let me handle this. The Harrison party is celebrating a special birthday, and I want everything to be perfect." She turned to the maitre d'. "James, please reset the chef's table for Mr. and Mrs. Harrison immediately, and send a complimentary bottle of the Dom Perignon 2008. Eleanor's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, her carefully orchestrated evening unraveling before her eyes. William had approached during the exchange and now placed a hand on Eleanor's arm. "Amanda, good to see you," he said, his typical reserve softened slightly. "Glad you could make it after all." "Happy birthday, William," I replied, genuinely fond of my quiet father-in-law. "I wouldn't have missed it." As we were led to our table, indeed the best in the house with a view into the gleaming kitchen where Sarah's team worked with balletic precision, I caught glimpses of the family's reactions. Rebecca gave me a subtle thumbs up. Cousin Thomas raised his wine glass in a silent toast. Others whispered behind napkins or studiously avoided looking our way. Eleanor remained standing near the entrance for several long moments, her posture rigid, before William gently guided her back to their table. The power shift was palpable. Sarah personally oversaw our service, sending out special dishes not on the regular menu. "Just some things I'm working on," she explained with a wink. Between courses, she would stop by to catch up, reminiscing about our childhood adventures, and filling me in on her journey from small-town Michigan to culinary stardom. "Remember when we tried to make croissants in your mom's kitchen and nearly burned the house down?" She laughed. "How could I forget? We were banned from unsupervised baking after that." Each shared memory further highlighted the genuine connection between us, a stark contrast to the manufactured propriety at Eleanor's table. Throughout the meal, I could feel her eyes on us, watching as Sarah embraced me like the sister she'd always been to me, as the staff treated us with special attention, as William made a point of stopping by our table to thank me for making the effort to be here. Michael relaxed as the evening progressed, his initial anxiety about confrontation giving way to quiet pride. Under the table, he squeezed my hand. "I've never seen my mother speechless before," he whispered. "It's kind of amazing." When dessert arrived, a special creation Sarah had made incorporating flavors from a cake my mother used to bake for our birthdays, Eleanor made one final attempt to regain control. She approached our table, glass in hand, smile firmly fixed in place. "Amanda, what a lovely coincidence that you know the chef," she said. "Though I must say, I'm surprised you never mentioned such an important connection before." The implication was clear. She suspected I'd orchestrated this entire scenario to embarrass her. Before I could respond, Sarah appeared, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Amanda and I go way back," she said warmly. "We supported each other through everything. Growing up, that kind of friendship shapes who you become." She looked directly at Eleanor. "Don't you think it's wonderful when people maintain those meaningful relationships, Mrs. Harrison? Even when others might try to come between them?" Eleanor's smile froze. Sarah had skewered her with perfect politeness. Without waiting for a response, Sarah turned to me. "I've got something special planned for the birthday cake presentation. You won't want to miss it." As she walked away, Eleanor stood awkwardly at our table, the dynamic between us irrevocably altered. For the first time in 5 years, she was the outsider. "Will you be joining the family for William's gift presentation?" she finally asked, her tone making it clear she expected me to decline. "Absolutely," I replied with a genuine smile. I wouldn't miss it for the world. The reverberations from the birthday dinner echoed through the Harrison family like aftershocks from an earthquake. The drive home that night was filled with a strange, nervous energy. Michael alternated between bursts of laughter and anxious speculation about what would happen next. "Did you see Mom's face when Sarah mentioned your childhood together?" he marveled. "I thought she might shatter like one of her precious crystal glasses." I felt oddly calm. It wasn't about humiliating her, Michael. It was about standing up for myself. "I know," he said, reaching for my hand. "I should have done it years ago. I'm sorry it took me so long to really see what was happening." The following morning, my phone exploded with notifications. Rebecca texted first. "OMG, last night was legendary. Call me." Cousin Thomas. "Standing ovation for you, Amanda. Long. Overdue." Even William sent a brief message. "Thank you for making the effort to attend. It meant a lot." Eleanor's response came more indirectly. A massive flower arrangement arrived at our door around noon. Orchids, lilies, and roses in an obviously expensive crystal vase. The card read simply, "Family is everything. Eleanor." "Is this an apology or a warning?" I asked Michael, examining the arrangement. "With my mother? Probably both," he admitted. The true test came 3 days later when Eleanor invited us for tea. Michael was ready to decline, but I suggested we go. "I'm not afraid of her anymore," I explained, "and avoiding her only gives her ammunition." Eleanor greeted us at the door herself rather than having the housekeeper usher us in, the first sign that something had shifted. The second was the spread she'd prepared. Alongside her usual formal tea service were chocolate chip cookies from my favorite Boston bakery. "Amanda, I got these especially for you, she said, her voice overly bright. I know how much you enjoy them. It was jarring, this sudden attention to my preferences after years of dismissing them. Throughout the stilted tea, Eleanor vacillated between her usual controlling behavior and awkward attempts at accommodation. She brought up the dinner only once. What a remarkable coincidence about your friend Sarah, she said, stirring her tea precisely. You must have been quite surprised to see her. Not really, I replied honestly. I knew Sarah owned Bellini's. Boston's a smaller city than it seems sometimes. The implication was clear. Her attempt to exclude me had backfired specifically, because she didn't know enough about my life and connections. Eleanor's hand trembled slightly as she set down her cup. Michael called his mother later that week to establish clearer boundaries. For once, he didn't waver when her voice took on the wounded tone that had always been his kryptonite. Mom, I love you, but what happened at Dad's birthday dinner was deliberate and hurtful, he said firmly. Amanda is my wife. When you exclude her, you exclude me. Eleanor attempted her usual tactics: tears, health concerns, accusations that I was turning her son against her. But something fundamental had changed. Michael stood firm. This isn't about taking sides, he told her. It's about respect. I respect that you're my mother. I need you to respect that Amanda is my wife. The weeks that followed brought a flurry of reactions from extended family members. Some reached out to commiserate about Eleanor's difficult personality, sharing their own stories of her manipulations. Others maintained a chilly distance, loyal to Eleanor's version of events in which I had deliberately humiliated her. Rebecca invited me for lunch, just the two of us, something she'd never done before. I should have said something years ago, she admitted over salads. Mom treated my husband similarly at first, but he just went along with everything, so eventually she accepted him. I knew it was worse with you because you actually stood your ground. Meanwhile, Sarah and I rekindled our friendship in earnest. We met for coffee, exchanged long text threads catching up on the years we'd missed, and even planned a cooking day at my apartment like we used to do as teenagers. Having this piece of my past reconnect with my present felt healing in a way I hadn't anticipated. Your mother-in-law is a piece of work, Sarah commented during one of our get-togethers. I've dealt with plenty of difficult people in restaurant kitchens, but she takes the cake. She's built her whole identity around controlling her family, I replied. When that control is threatened, she doesn't know who she is. Eleanor's attempts to regain footing were both persistent and evolving. First came the gifts, not just for special occasions, but random deliveries of things she thought I might like. Then came invitations to exclusive events, charity galas, club luncheons, art openings, all designed to showcase her social standing and, by extension, her generosity in including me. When these approaches failed to restore her former dominance, she tried a new tactic: illness. Nothing serious or verifiable, just vague complaints about stress-related symptoms and concerning test results that required family support. Michael saw through it immediately. She pulled the same routine when I wanted to attend college out of state, he told me. Suddenly had heart palpitations that mysteriously resolved once I agreed to stay in Massachusetts. The most desperate attempt came when Eleanor showed up unannounced at my office, asking my assistant if we could do lunch. I agreed, curious about this unprecedented move into my territory. Over an uncomfortable meal at a nearby restaurant, Eleanor attempted to establish common ground. I've been thinking about getting more involved in marketing for my charity work, she said. Perhaps you could advise me? It was so transparent, an attempt to reposition herself as the knowledge seeker and me as the useful resource. I kept my responses polite but professional, neither rejecting nor embracing this new dynamic. By Thanksgiving, 3 months after the birthday dinner incident, a new normal had begun to emerge. We accepted an invitation to dinner at the Harrison, home, but with conditions. Michael made it clear we would leave if Eleanor made any disparaging comments. To everyone's surprise, the dinner passed without major incident. Eleanor still attempted to control conversations and seating arrangements, but her sharper edges had been sanded down. When I complimented her table setting, her thank you seemed almost genuine. The real breakthrough came unexpectedly from William. As Eleanor busied herself in the kitchen, he lowered his voice to address Michael and me. "I want to apologize," he said, his usual reserve cracking slightly. "I should have stepped in years ago. Eleanor can be difficult, but seeing you stand your ground, Amanda, it reminded me that enabling her behavior isn't kindness, not to her, and certainly not to the rest of us." Coming from the man who had spent 40 years carefully navigating around Eleanor's moods, this admission was monumental. Michael was visibly moved, reaching out to grasp his father's shoulder in silent understanding. During the holidays, Eleanor made a show of asking for my input on family traditions. "Perhaps we could incorporate something from your family this year, Amanda?" The olive branch was tentative, possibly insincere, but I accepted it at face value. I taught her how to make my grandmother's cinnamon rolls for Christmas morning, a recipe Eleanor followed with uncharacteristic deference to my instructions. When Sarah invited the entire Harrison family to a special New Year's Eve dinner at Bellini's, Eleanor accepted with grace that seemed only partially forced. Watching her interact with Sarah, a self-made success from my humble hometown, was a study in cognitive dissonance. Eleanor couldn't dismiss Sarah's achievements as she had dismissed mine, and this contradiction forced a subtle reassessment of her prejudices. By spring, the power dynamic had stabilized into something approaching mutual respect. Eleanor would likely never fully change. Her controlling nature was too deeply ingrained. But she had learned there were consequences to her actions. For perhaps the first time in her adult life, she couldn't simply bulldoze her way to what she wanted. Michael flourished in this new reality, no longer torn between two loyalties. He began setting boundaries in other areas of his life as well, declining a promotion that would have meant constant travel and stress. "Life's too short to live by other people's expectations," he told me, a lesson we'd both learned the hard way. 6 months after that fateful birthday dinner, Eleanor did something none of us expected. She invited Sarah and me to help plan a surprise anniversary party for William. It was a small gesture, but a meaningful one, an acknowledgement that my friendship with Sarah wasn't a weapon to be used against her, but a relationship to be respected. As we worked together on the guest list in Eleanor's impeccable sunroom, she paused to study me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You know," she said finally, "Michael has seemed happier these past months than I've seen him in years." It wasn't quite an admission of wrongdoing. It wasn't quite an apology. But coming from Eleanor Harrison, it was a revolution. The transformation in our family dynamic didn't happen overnight. Real change rarely does. But as we approached the 1-year mark since that pivotal night at Bellini's, I could look back and marvel at how far we'd come. The most obvious change was in our Sunday gatherings. What had once been mandatory performances at Eleanor's dining table evolved into a rotating schedule where different family members hosted. The first time Eleanor stepped into our home without immediately rearranging, something was a quiet victory. When she actually complimented my table setting, Michael nearly choked on his wine. "Are you feeling all right, Mom?" he'd asked, only half joking. Eleanor had sniffed in response, but there was a hint of self-awareness in her eyes. "I'm capable of growth, Michael, despite what some might think." My relationship with Eleanor would never be warm and fuzzy. We were too different, our history too complicated. But we'd reached a place of mutual recognition. Not quite respect, but something approaching it. She no longer treated me as a temporary inconvenience in Michael's life, and I no longer viewed her as the villain in mine. My friendship with Sarah flourished during this time, filling a void I hadn't fully acknowledged. Having someone who knew me before I was Michael Harrison's wife, or Eleanor's daughter-in-law, helped me reconnect with parts of myself I'd suppressed in my efforts to fit into the Harrison world. Sarah and I established a monthly tradition where I would help in Bellini's kitchen for charity events. My marketing skills paired with her culinary empire to raise funds for literacy programs in underserved communities. Eleanor even attended one of these events, watching with complicated emotions as I moved confidently through a world entirely separate from her influence. "You're quite good at this," she'd commented, observing me coordinate with donors. "I suppose you're professional. Experience has some applications after all." From Eleanor, this qualified as effusive praise. Michael underwent perhaps the most profound transformation. Released from the constant tension of mediating between his mother and me, he rediscovered passions he'd set aside years ago. He took up sailing again, started mentoring young entrepreneurs, and even began talking about writing a book. "I spent so much energy trying to keep everyone happy that I forgot what made me happy," he confessed one evening as we walked along the harbor. "Watching you stand up to my mother taught me something important." "That I'm stubborn as hell?" I joked. "That living authentically is worth the discomfort," he replied, squeezing my hand. "You never pretended to be someone you weren't, even when it would have been easier." William, too, seemed to find new footing in our recalibrated family. With Eleanor's influence slightly diminished, he spoke up more at gatherings, revealed a dry sense of humor none of us had fully appreciated, and even started planning trips that weren't centered around Eleanor's preferences. "I've always wanted to see the Grand Canyon," he mentioned during a family dinner. "Eleanor prefers Europe, but I think it's time we saw more of our own country." Eleanor had pursed her lips but nodded. "I suppose we could try something different." The true test of our new dynamic came during the holidays. For years, Christmas had been Eleanor's domain, meticulously planned, rigidly traditional, and inevitably stressful. This year, she surprised everyone by suggesting we try something new. "Perhaps we could do Christmas Eve at your home," she said to Michael and me during Thanksgiving dinner. "Amanda could incorporate some of her family traditions." The table fell momentarily silent. Rebecca recovered first. "That sounds wonderful. I've always been curious about how other families celebrate." Christmas Eve at our home became a blend of traditions. My mother's special eggnog alongside Eleanor's traditional roast. My childhood ornaments hanging beside Harrison family heirlooms. It wasn't seamless. Eleanor still rearranged the table settings when she thought I wasn't looking, but it was genuine progress. As guests departed that evening, Eleanor lingered, examining a photograph on our mantel. It showed Sarah and me, at age 16, arms around each other, grinning wildly after winning a local baking competition. "You know," Eleanor said quietly, "I always wanted a daughter who shared my interests. Rebecca was always more like her father, practical, uninterested in social graces." She touched the frame lightly. "I suppose I resented that you had this bond with someone else, this history I couldn't touch or control." It was the closest Eleanor would ever come to explaining her behavior, let alone apologizing for it. I joined her at the mantel, keeping a respectful distance. "We can't manufacture connection," I said. "But we can choose to recognize the connections that exist, even if they're not what we imagined." Eleanor nodded once, decisively, as if concluding a business negotiation. Indeed, as spring arrived, bringing with it the anniversary of William's fateful birthday dinner, Eleanor did something truly unexpected. She invited us to dinner at Bellini's. Just the four of us. Eleanor, William, Michael, and me. "Sarah has agreed to prepare her special menu," Eleanor said, a hint of pride in her voice at using Sarah's first name, at having established her own connection, however tenuous. The evening was remarkably pleasant. Eleanor asked about my recent promotion with genuine interest. William and Michael discussed a potential investment without Eleanor redirecting the conversation. When Sarah emerged from the kitchen to check on us, Eleanor actually stood to greet her warmly. "Your risotto is exceptional," she told Sarah. "I've tried the recipe you shared with Amanda, but it never turns out quite like this." "It's all in the wrist," Sarah replied with a wink at me. "Amanda can show you the technique. She always had a better touch for it than I did." As we enjoyed dessert, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The pain and frustration had been real, the confrontations necessary. But sitting here now, watching Eleanor laugh at something Sarah said, seeing Michael relaxed and happy, I felt an unexpected sense of peace. Eleanor would never be the mother-in-law of my dreams. I would never be the daughter-in-law of hers. But we had found a way to coexist that preserved our dignity and allowed for genuine moments of connection. "A toast," William proposed, raising his glass. "To family. Not just the one we're born into or marry into, but the one we build through. Understanding and patience." Eleanor met my eyes across the table as we clinked glasses. In that moment, I understood something profound. Standing up for yourself doesn't always mean winning or defeating the other person. Sometimes, it simply means creating enough space for both of you to exist authentically. As we prepared to leave, Eleanor touched my arm briefly. "Amanda, I've been meaning to ask, would you consider joining the Literacy Foundation board? Your marketing expertise would be valuable." It was an olive branch, extended in her own way. Not perfect, but genuine. "I'd be happy to," I replied. Outside the restaurant, Michael wrapped an arm around my shoulders. "A year ago, I never would have believed this was possible." "Me neither," I admitted. "But I've learned something important through all this. When you refuse to make yourself smaller to accommodate someone else's insecurities, you create the possibility for everyone to grow. Life isn't about winning every battle or forcing others to admit they were wrong. It's about having the courage to stand in your truth, even when others try to write you out of the story. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply show up, claim your seat at the table, and refuse to be erased. Have you ever had to stand up to someone who tried to push you out or make you feel small? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if you've ever dealt with difficult in-laws, and subscribe to hear more stories about finding your voice in challenging relationships. Remember, sometimes the most important family isn't the one you're born into, but the one you choose and create through authentic connections. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it gives you courage in your own relationships.